Okay, so picture this. On January 9th, a single classified document leaks from the executive office. And get this, it wasn't a declaration of war, it wasn't a new sanction, it was a spreadsheet. Codenamed Project Icebreak, it laid out a proposal so audacious it's already sending shockwaves through the North Atlantic. What we're about to break down here isn't just some diplomatic spat. It's the blueprint for a whole new way of doing geopolitical conquest.
So, let's get right to the heart of it. The core of this proposal, a direct tax-free cash transfer. We're talking $100,000 to every single registered citizen of Greenland. Now think about that. For a population of just 57,000 people, where the average income is maybe a third of that amount, this isn't just an offer, it's a life-altering event. The total price tag for the U.S.? Roughly $6 billion.
And we need to be crystal clear about something. This is not foreign aid. Not even close. Think of it as a hostile takeover bid for an entire country, but it's framed like a corporate shareholder buyout. You see, the U.S. seems to have identified Greenland as a kind of distressed asset, currently held by Denmark. So instead of talking to the board of directors over in Copenhagen, Washington is going straight to the shareholders, the people of Greenland themselves, with an offer that's designed to be flat out impossible to refuse.
You know, here at Bullion Signal, this is exactly what we do. Our whole mission is to help you find the real signal hiding in all the noise of global finance. And a story like this, it's a perfect example of a huge signal that most of the mainstream media is completely missing. We're actually building a whole community of strategic thinkers who want to get ahead of these powerful shifts, and we'd love to have you join us.
All right. Here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the $6 billion offer itself. Then we'll dive into the 4 strategic pillars behind this whole thing. First, financial warfare, then the rare earth key, the Arctic fortress, and finally, the polar toll booth. And at the end, we'll tie it all together and talk about the signal and the strategy.
Okay. Let's kick things off with the offer itself. We need to dig into the numbers here and just the raw audacity of this $6 billion proposal. Because this isn't really just about the money. It's about using financial power on a scale that just completely changes the rules of the game. It's a look at a new and, you could say, brutally pragmatic American playbook for the 21st century. So let's put this $6 billion into perspective, because this is where it gets really interesting. It sounds like a monumental sum of money, right? But for the United States government, it's practically a rounding error. It's actually less than the cost of a single Zumwalt-class destroyer. In fact, the Department of Defense burns through that much cash roughly every 3 days. It just goes to show you the incredible financial asymmetry the U.S. can deploy when it really wants to. Well, as you can probably guess, the reaction from Copenhagen and Brussels was pure outrage. They're calling it grotesque, absurd, an insult to their sovereign dignity. But here's the thing. This emotional, principled response is exactly what U.S. planners seem to be counting on. Because while Europe is talking about dignity and norms, Washington is just focused on the cold, hard math, and they're betting that the people of Greenland will do the exact same. Okay, that brings us to the first pillar of this whole strategy. And you gotta understand, this isn't a military plan. It's a doctrine of financial warfare. The central idea here is to weaponize the overwhelming power of the US dollar itself. It's a way to completely bypass the need for tanks, sanctions, or messy UN resolutions, and instead make a direct appeal to a population's economic self-interest. This Project Icebreak document actually introduces a new term for this, financial annexation. And when you think about it, it's a really clean, efficient method of conquest. You don't have to risk soldiers' lives. You don't have to face global condemnation. You just make an economic offer so compelling that the people themselves vote to align their interests with yours. It's really the ultimate expression of soft power, but it's backed by some very, very hard cash.
And the contrast between the old way of doing things and this new model is it's stark. The 20th century was all about brute force, right? Tanks crossing borders, military invasions. But this 21st century model, the one laid out in the plan, is so much more sophisticated. It uses the global financial system. It wraps itself in the language of democracy and shareholder value, and at the end of the day, it achieves the exact same territorial goals, just with a lot less friction and, frankly, a lot less bloodshed.
So this brings up a really critical question, and I'm genuinely curious to see what you think down in the comments. If this playbook works in Greenland, where else could it be used? I mean, what other countries out there hold strategic assets, critical resources, key geography, deep water ports that might be vulnerable to this kind of direct economic buyout? The implications here are they're enormous.
All right, now we get to the first big reason why. Why would the U.S. risk a huge diplomatic crisis over this? Well, it's not about the ice, it's about what's underneath the ice. And that brings us to pillar number 2, the geological grand prize. We're talking about a massive deposit of rare earth elements that are absolutely non-negotiable for modern tech, and even more critically for the American military-industrial complex. See, for decades, the West basically sat back and allowed China to build a near total monopoly on mining and, this is the key part, processing these elements. Today, China controls over 90% of the entire global supply chain. This has created a strategic vulnerability that is just staggering. And it's not a theoretical problem. China started to flex that muscle with export restrictions on January 1st, which sent a massive shockwave right through the Pentagon.
And just to be perfectly clear, we're not talking about abstract commodities here. These elements are the essential ingredients for America's most advanced weapon systems. You literally cannot build an F-35 fighter jet, a Virginia-class submarine, or a Tomahawk missile without heavy rare earths like terbium, neodymium, and yttrium. And the scary part? Right now, the U.S. produces almost none of them. This isn't just a problem, it's an existential threat to national security.
Which brings us to a very specific place, a mountain in southern Greenland called Kvanefjeld. Now, this place is a geological freak of nature. It's one of the largest deposits of rare earth oxides anywhere in the world. But what makes it so important is that it's uniquely rich in those heavy, rare earths, the ones you could call the war metals. Kvanefjeld might just be the only single deposit in the entire Western Hemisphere that could completely break China's dominance over the supply chain.
But of course, there's a catch. You could call it a poison pill. Actually, there are 3. First, the rare earths there are mixed with uranium, which has created a huge political deadlock because of environmental concerns. Second, a key shareholder in the company that has the mining rights is, you guessed it, a Chinese state-linked firm. And third, that same company holds all the technical agreements, which means even if the stuff was mined, it would probably be shipped to China for processing. China has this asset completely locked down.
And this is where that $100,000 offer comes in like a geopolitical sledgehammer. The U.S. has clearly decided that trying to fight this battle in Greenland's parliament is a lost cause, so they're just flipping the entire table over. The offer is designed to create a brand new political reality, one where the economic self-interest of every single citizen simply steamrolls the political and environmental gridlock. That would allow the U.S. to just step in, secure the asset, and manage the whole operation.
All right, let's move on to our third pillar. And for this one, we're shifting our focus from what's under the ice to the strategic value of the land itself.
Because Greenland isn't just a giant mine, it is the ultimate military high ground in the Northern Hemisphere. And in an age of renewed great power competition, controlling that territory isn't a luxury anymore, it's an absolute defensive necessity.
You know, the physics of missile trajectories are pretty brutal and, frankly, very simple. If a nuclear missile is launched at North America from Russia or from China, it is going to fly over the Arctic. That's just the shortest path. And that makes Greenland the inescapable gatekeeper for America's nuclear shield. There's no way around it. Whoever controls Greenland effectively controls the entire northern approach to the United States.
Now, for decades, the U.S. has operated Pituffik Space Base way up in northern Greenland. Its massive early warning radar is basically the tripwire for the entire continent. It gives that critical 15-minute warning of an inbound attack, just enough time to launch a counterstrike. But here's the problem. That absolutely vital base operates under a treaty with Denmark, and it seems U.S. military planners now see that arrangement as way too fragile and restrictive for the world we live in today.
So you see, the island's importance is simply non-negotiable. This isn't just another overseas base. It is the gatekeeper of the American nuclear shield. And with Russia remilitarizing the Arctic and China now calling itself a near-Arctic state, the idea that this gatekeeper is controlled by a somewhat reluctant ally, well, that has apparently become completely unacceptable to the Pentagon. This really brings up a difficult question about the future of global security. On one hand, you have Denmark and other European nations who want to keep the Arctic as a zone of peace, low tension. But on the other hand, the U.S. seems to view that as a dangerous fantasy. So how do you possibly reconcile those two worldviews? It's a fundamental clash between idealism and cold, hard realism, and Greenland is ground zero. I'd really like to know what your perspective is on this one.
So this is how the buyout is supposed to serve two purposes at once. It's not just about securing the treasure, the rare earths, it's about securing the treasure chest itself. That $6 billion isn't just the price of a mine, it's really the down payment on a permanent, unsinkable aircraft carrier and missile defense station parked right at the top of the world. It is a move to permanently fortify the northern wall of Fortress America.
So what's the ultimate signal we should be taking from all this? Well, this whole plan reveals a massive shift in strategy, away from traditional diplomacy and towards direct, raw economic action. It's a playbook for a world where overwhelming financial power can literally redraw maps without firing a single shot. But this is only part of the story. The ice is melting, new shipping lanes are opening up, and in our next explainer, we're going to explore the final, crucial pillar, the coming battle for the polar toll booth, and what the powerful investment implications are in this new Cold War. You won't want to miss it.